My roommate started disappearing from our locked dorm room in the middle of the night. When I finally caught him, I realized he wasn't awake. He wasn't even himself anymore. But what I found in the basement underneath our building is something Eve never been able to forget. This happened at a large state university in Pennsylvania in 2019. I was a junior living in one of the older residence halls on campus, the kind built in the 70s that creaks when you walk through. The halls late at night, the building had that old institutional smell, chalk dust, old carpet radiator heat. My roommate Jake seemed normal enough, quiet, studious. We shared the space without much conflict, which is all you can really ask for in a dorm. Room this small, 2 beds on opposite walls, 2 desks, a closet that barely fit both our stuff. The window was sealed shut due to some radiator malfunction. The maintenance department kept saying they would fix. They never did. 3 weeks into the semester, things started changing. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke to movement in the darkness for a moment. I thought I was dreaming, but my eyes focused, and I saw Jake standing at the door, completely dressed, backpack slung over his shoulders. His hand was on the doorknob. I asked where he was going. He didn't answer, didn't even turn around. He just stood there staring at the door like it was the most important thing in the world. After maybe 30 seconds, something seemed to reset. In him, he turned back toward his bed, took off the backpack and lay back down like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep for another 2 hours. It happened again. 2 nights later, same time, same everything. By the 3rd occurrence, I tried to talk to him about it the next morning. He had no memory of it. Said he must be sleepwalking. Said he would go to health services about it. I never went over. The next week it happened almost every single night. 2 a.m., like a timer going off in his head. He would wake up, dress himself from clothes that were somehow already laid out on his desk clothes. He didn't remember arranging and stand at that door like he was waiting for permission to leave. Sometimes he would only stand there for a minute. Other times, 5 or 10 minutes would pass while I watched him in the dark, barely breathing, my phone clutched in my hand. One night I got bold. I asked him directly, Jake, where are you trying to go? His head rotated slowly toward me. When he spoke, his voice wasn't right. It was flat, mechanical, like someone had recorded his words and played them back outside. He said, why do you need to go outside? I have to what? He turned back to the door. That was it. Conversation over. After another few minutes, he climbed back into bed and fell asleep instantly, like he had been given a command to stop. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk watching him, my leg bouncing, my stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't normal sleepwalking. This was something else, something deliberate. The next morning, I went to the ERA and told her everything. She listened seriously, asked if I felt unsafe, which I lied and said no, and recommended that Jake see a doctor. She seemed concerned, but I could tell she didn't really believe me, or didn't know how to handle it. Jake still hadn't done anything about it. That Friday, when 2 a.m. came around, I made a decision. I'd already decided. I kept my student ID in my pocket. When he dressed and moved toward the door, I got up. I unlocked it before he could grab the knob. His hand brushed against air. He pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway without hesitation. I followed. He moved through the corridor with absolute certainty, like he had walked this path 1,000 times, down the stairs, through the common room where someone's TV was still playing in the darkness, toward the basement door. My heart was hammering. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to go back to bed, to pretend I'd never seen any of this. Jake opened the basement door and went down the basement. Was everything you would expect from a building that old. Exposed pipes, concrete floor, the smell of mold and something chemical underneath it. The fluorescent lights flickered as we moved deeper, casting everything in an unstable glow. Jake walked with complete purpose toward the back, toward the mechanical room. The sound got louder as we approached a kind of static whisper hybrid, almost like voices, but not quite, like something between radio frequency and human speech. He reached for the mechanical room door handle. I grabbed his arm. I said his name over and over louder each time until his eyes finally focused. When recognition came back, he looked absolutely terrified. He had no idea where. He was no memory of getting dressed or walking here. No memory of the sound. I took him back to the room. We didn't talk. There was nothing to say the next morning. Jake finally made an appointment at health services that led to a neurology referral. That led to tests, MRI, EEG, blood work. Everything came back normal, clean. No tumors, no seizures, no neurological issues. The neurologist seemed frustrated. He referred Jake to a psychiatrist he knew off campus. That appointment was 2 weeks away. Those 2 weeks got worse. Jake would make it all the way to the basement on several nights. ID stopped trying to hide it from him. I started locking the door from the outside, keeping the key so he physically couldn't leave no matter how hard he tried. I know how extreme that sounds, but you didn't see the look in his eyes when he pulled on that doorknob. Didn't hear the desperation in his voice when he said he had to go back down there. The night before his psychiatry appointment, Jake woke me up on his own. It was around midnight and he was crying actual tears. He said he was having nightmares. No, he said they were more than nightmares. They felt more real than waking life. In every dream, something was calling him from the basement. Not words, just his name over and over, like it was clawing at his consciousness. He said he was terrified. He was losing his mind. He went to the appointment the next day. He never told me what they talked about. A week later, his parents showed up. They packed his things into the car. Jake wouldn't explain why he needed to leave. He just said being in that building was making it worse, that every night the pull was getting stronger, that he couldn't stay here. He withdrew from school mid-semester. I stayed in that room for the rest of the year. The episodes stopped after he left, but I never went down to that basement again. Not once. Years later, Jake's mom ran into my mom at the grocery store. She mentioned that Jake had eventually recovered, that he had transferred schools and finished his degree. But my mom said there was something else too, something Jake's mom mentioned quietly, like it was a secret. Jake still wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night, already fully dressed, before he realizes where he is. He still don't know what was in that mechanical room. I don't know what was making that sound or why it wanted Jake so badly, or what would have happened if I hadn't grabbed his arm that night, but I know we were never meant to find out. When I got to my dorm on move-in day, I was alone. My assigned roommate never showed up. But for the rest of the semester, someone else was living in that room with me. This was 2017, at a small liberal arts college in Vermont. Housing was incredibly tight that year, so I got assigned to a double in one of the older academic dormitories. Nice room, actually, high ceilings, good natural light from a large window that overlooked the quad. 2 full beds on opposite walls, clean, quiet. My roommate was supposed to arrive during move-in day. I got there around noon and set up my side. By evening, she still hadn't arrived. By Friday, there was still an empty bed and an empty closet. I mentioned it to the RA. She checked her system and said, yes, someone was definitely assigned to the room, but she just hadn't shown up yet. Told me not to worry, students change their mind about attending all the time. The room stayed empty all through that first week. I wasn't complaining. Having a double-to-yourself freshman year was practically a luxury. Then Sunday night, around 1 in the morning, I woke to the sound of the door opening. I thought maybe my roommate was finally arriving. I turned on the light to introduce myself. The hallway was empty. The door was open about 6 inches, but no one was there. I closed it again and went back to sleep, assuming it hadn't latched properly. It happened again the next night and the night after. On the 4th night, I stayed awake. I turned off my lamp and watched the door. My phone was charging, glowing softly in the darkness. At exactly 1 in the morning, the doorknob turned. Slowly, deliberately, the door opened about 6 inches. Then it closed again. No one was there. Not before, not during, not after. I called the RAA the next morning, told her about the door opening by itself. She apologized and said she would have facilities check the lock. Maybe it wasn't seating properly. The maintenance guy came by the next day, checked everything and reported that the lock was functioning perfectly. He couldn't explain the problem. That night, the door opened again at 1 a.m., but this time I heard something else. From across the room, from the direction of the empty bed, I heard the sound of someone shifting. Under the covers, the soft rustle of sheets and a mattress compressing slightly, like someone was rolling over. I turned on every light in the room. My hands were shaking. The empty bed was empty. The mattress was completely undisturbed, perfectly flat. But for just a second, I swear, I could see the faintest depression in the center, like someone had been lying there moments before over. The next week it got worse. I'd hear breathing that wasn't mine. I'd wake up to see a figure sitting on the other bed. Just a shadow, just an outline. But when I reached for the lamp, there was nothing there. The bed was empty. The room was empty. I'd find my door slightly ajar, even though I'd locked it. I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, but there was never anything. When I turned to look directly, sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to sounds that shouldn't exist. Waiting for one amie asked the RAI if I could switch rooms. I told her I was just uncomfortable with the uncertainty of having an unknown roommate assignment. She seemed surprised, apparently switching dorms. Mid-semester wasn't normal, but she agreed to look into it. She came back a few hours later and said she had found me a single room in a different building. I could move that Friday before I left. I asked her if anyone had been assigned to my old room yet. She looked at her computer and frowned. She said the system still showed my original roommate assignment as active. The girl's name was still in the system, still marked as occupying the room. I asked her name, Sarah Chung. The AI said, she's never actually shown up though. I should probably delete this assignment. I went back to that dorm room one last time to grab the rest of my stuff. In my head, I was already gone, but I was curious. I searched for Sarah Chung on Facebook and found someone from my graduation year who attended a different college in Massachusetts. She'd transferred schools at the beginning of that same semester, starting at her new university. The week our semester began, she'd never set foot on our campus. I moved to my single room. That first night I actually slept, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the door opening at exactly 1 a.m. every night, about the sound of someone breathing in that empty room, about a girl who was assigned housing but never came to campus, whose room assignment was never canceled, and whose empty bed wasn't actually empty. What bothered me most was how long the assignment stayed in the system. Weeks. An entire assigned dormitory room occupied by someone who didn't exist was active in the university's database. And every night at 1 a.m. something that wasn't Sarah Chung was acting like it lived there. I never went back to that dorm. Years later, I've never told anyone this story because I know exactly how it sounds, but I know what I experienced. I know I heard those sounds, and I know that I was somehow sharing a space with something that had claimed it long before I did. I was doing research for my senior thesis in my university's library basement when I found a door that wasn't on any map. What was inside made me wish I'd never opened it, and when I tried to tell someone about it, the university made absolutely sure I would never talk about it again. This happened in 2021 at a mid-sized university in Ohio. I was a senior working on my thesis about the university's history. The librarian sent me to the basement to access the primary source archives. Boxes of old documents, founding records, photographs, letters from the university's founding decades. The basement was cold, colder than the rest of the building. No windows, fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. The air smelled like old paper and dust, but underneath that was something else, something chemical and faintly organic that I couldn't quite place. The archive room was in a corner past the mechanical storage and stacks of outdated computer equipment. I spent hours down there pulling boxes, photographing documents, cross-referencing dates and names. It was tedious work, but necessary. Around 4 in the afternoon, I needed to use the bathroom. I left the archive room and headed back toward the stairs. That's when I noticed the door. It was different from everything else in the basement. Older, made of heavy wood, darker than anything around it. It had a mechanical lock on it, the kind you don't see anymore, that looked like it hadn't been used in decades, maybe longer. The nameplate beside the door was so worn and faded, I couldn't read it no matter how close I got. I tried the handle, locked, obviously, but something about it made me uncomfortable. I filed it away in my mind to ask about later. When I got upstairs, I mentioned the locked door to the librarian. I asked what it was, where it led, why it was down there. She went very quiet. She asked me exactly where I'd seen it and whether I'd touched anything else. She said the basement was restricted archival space, and I shouldn't be exploring beyond the designated record room. She said there were maintenance areas that weren't meant to be accessed. Her reaction was so intense that it made my curiosity spike. Instead of dampening it that night, I looked up the library's building blueprints. The oldest versions available on the university website went back to 1972, long after the library's original construction. The basement was marked with vague labels: mechanical storage, climate control. The room with the old locked door wasn't labeled at all. The next day I went back to the basement. I told myself I was just going to do more research. But before I left, I walked over to that door again. I was going to try the handle one more time just to confirm what I'd felt. As I got close, I heard it, the sound of paper rustling or something moving, shifting slightly behind the locked door. I stopped walking. The sound stopped. Toei knocked. I'm not sure why. Pure impulse. I asked if anyone was in there. Nothing. I tried the handle again. Still locked. But I was certain I'd heard something. Something that had heard me and gone completely still. Over the next week, I went back to that door every single time I was in the basement, and every single time I heard the same thing: papers rustling, something shifting, then silence the moment I got close. I did more digging. I found a reference in a 1968 university newsletter to something called the Archive Expansion Project. It mentioned that valuable historical materials were being relocated for preservation. A friend of mine worked in the registrar's office. I asked her casually if she knew anything about an old archive storage room in the basement of the main library. She got uncomfortable immediately. She said I should talk to the director of the library about that. When I approached the director, she shut it down completely. She said there was no old archive room, said the basement was only for maintenance and climate-controlled record storage. For current materials, said if I had questions about accessing specific documents, I should submit a request through proper channels, but I knew what I'd seen. I knew there was a door, and I was running out of time before graduation, so I did something. Stupid, I borrowed a crowbar from a friend who worked construction on a Tuesday night around 11 when the library was mostly empty. I went back to the basement. The lock was old and corroded. It took maybe 5 minutes of leverage and pressure before something inside gave way. The door swung open. The smell hit me first, not old paper or dust decay. The sharp, unmistakable smell of something that had been rotting for a very long time. The room was enormous, larger than the exterior of the library would have allowed based on the blueprints. It was packed with filing cabinets, wooden shelves, old desks covered in papers. But that wasn't what made my hands start shaking. Along the back wall were large glass containers, like aquariums, but filled with dark liquid, and floating in that liquid were things that looked like human remains, parts of them, pale preserved, suspended in whatever chemical was keeping them intact. I didn't stay long enough to fully process what I was seeing. Panic took over. I ran. I didn't even try to close the door. I just ran up the stairs out of the library back to my dorm, where I sat in the dark trying to convince myself I'd hallucinated the entire thing. By the next morning, I'd convinced myself that there had to be a rational explanation, a medical display, an educational exhibit, something that made sense. Went to campus security and reported breaking into a locked room in the basement. I described what I'd seen, my voice shaking, my hands still trembling. The officer took notes. His expression never changed. He asked me to show him the room. When we got to the basement, the door was gone, not locked, not sealed, gone. The wall was smooth concrete, completely undisturbed. There was no indication that a She was incredibly friendly, professional. She said there had been a report about me breaking into a restricted area of the library and that disciplinary action was being considered. But then she said something that made my stomach drop. She said the university valued curious, engaged students. She said situations like this could usually be handled without formal discipline as long as the student in question agreed to not discuss the incident with others. She slid a document across the desk. It was a non-disclosure agreement. It said I wouldn't speak about anything I may or may not have seen in the restricted areas of the library. It said violation would result in legal action by the university. It was written vaguely enough that it covered basically anything related to my experience. I was terrified. I signed it, she smiled. She said I was making the right choice. She said the university had very old buildings, and sometimes historical materials were stored in unusual ways for preservation purposes. She said not everything needed to be discussed or shared. Then she said something. If never forgotten, some doors are locked for a reason, and some doors aren't supposed to exist at Alley. Finished my thesis without using any of the materials. I'd found I graduated that spring without telling another soul what I'd received. But I spent years wondering what was really in that room, who had access to it, how long it had been there, whether the door was really gone or whether the university just found a way to make me forget where it was. Whatever was in that basement, they wanted it kept secret badly enough to threaten a student into permanent silence. That's what scared me the most.